Moving right along, we do have a great speaker, and his name is Hosni Zaouali, and he'll be speaking about the impact of AI on language learning. Let me tell you a little bit about Hosni. Hosni is the founder of Voila Learning. He's an executive educator at Stanford University in California and specializes in customer behavior and language application. Using a design thinking approach, he will explain why and how artificial intelligence is about to transform language learning and education at large. Is Hosni here? Yes, so there you are. Just wanted to make sure. Round of applause and welcome Hosni to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Hosni, but you can call me Hos. And this presentation, we're going to be interacting back and forth with the crowd. So please, do not hesitate to interrupt me. So as a matter of fact, if we can have a microphone in the audience, that would be really good. So we can wrap up with any time you want to ask a question, please feel free to go ahead and ask, okay? So I hate talking about myself, but basically I founded Voila Learning. I work as a course facilitator at Stanford in capacity of basically 3 courses. One of them is critical analytical thinking. And we help executives all over the world to make better decisions in terms of, well, everybody knows what critical thinking is. Well, put some data in there and it becomes critical analytical thinking. So we teach them basically to gather the most data to make the best decision possible. And sometimes the data is not even available. So there's a whole procedure in that matter that's been created by Professor Chaim Mendelson. Another one is customer behavior and neuroscience. And the third one is successful change. So successful change is a little bit what we're going to be talking about today. The impact of AI on education. Everybody knows, I hope, well, it's okay if not, but AI, there's a lot of confusion about what is AI and what is not AI. So anyway, an easy definition would be AI is the ability for a computer or a program or a machine to think and learn. So, to have and obviously, as I said, please feel free to interrupt me at any time, okay? If you want to have an idea of what is this new beast that we call AI, think about chess. And I know that some of you are old enough here to remember the player Kasparov when he played against the IBM machine called, help me again, AlphaZero or Stockfish? Deep Blue? Deep Blue. And then basically it took how long for Kasparov to win? It took him like 5 years or something like that, you know, basically back and forth. Well, check this out. Google, you know, came up with a new machine learning that will be, basically it's a program that is able to play chess, all right? So think about this. It took approximately 5 years for Deep Blue to play against other players and finally beat the best player in chess ever, Kasparov, all right? These guys now at Google show up with a Stockfish, with AlphaZero, and what happens is very simple. The algorithm, we made him play not against people, but against himself. That's already impressive. But then we made him play against Deep Blue. And what happened is something very interesting. Out of 100 games, AlphaZero won 86 times. And the rest, it was a tie. So this new program from IBM never really won. Now, this is really impressive, but push it even a little bit further. How long did it take for this new algorithm to train itself and beat the best chess program ever? 4 hours. Since they pressed play, it trained itself by playing against itself, not against anyone, and became so powerful that nobody can actually compete now because it gets better over time. What does it mean? And let's take that back to, forget about education right now. Take it to, let's say if AlphaZero, this new algorithm, starts playing a real war. It means that we have now a Minister of Defense waiting for this algorithm to tell him what would be his next move. And more, this is what the future is going to look like. Humans obviously have a huge, huge part to play in there. But check this out. It's going to become what we're going to call a digital dictatorship, where the intelligence of these machine learning are going to be so big that we have no other choice than sit back, relax, and let's see what's going to happen. Now, that raises another question. The question is the question of bias. All right? All these codes are programmed by humans. And let's just say these guys, if these guys live in Toronto, actually Toronto is a good example of multiculturalism, so I really love it. But let's just say, they come from the Valley or from China. Obviously, there's a massive, massive bias in there. Let's do it this way. If the programmer is a male, between 25 and 35, it's obviously going to have a specific vision or view of the world. And that view is going to be reflected in the code. So put it this way, for instance, do you remember back in the days where we were starting university and we had those friends of ours who were like, oh, I'm going to go to theater or I'm going to go major in philosophy. And everybody was like, hey, good luck with the job market. Well, this is what's going to happen right now. People basically are going to start coding things, and we're going to have a desperate need for these philosophers. Why? Because this code, we need to tackle real questions. If you combine robotics and AI, and you create, let's just say, machine soldiers, these machine soldiers are going to have to make decisions. And these decisions are going to be based on the code that you initially based them from. So, these philosophy majors are going to start to be hired by Google, Facebook, and all these major companies because we need to tackle serious questions. Here's a serious question. Let's just say Airbus, European plane company, or Boeing. They create machine learning that will basically help this plane to pilot itself and land itself and do basically does everything itself. At some point, if there is any problem, the plane is going to have to decide himself, should I crash into a village and kill the villagers, or try to save, my passengers, or should I crash in the middle of the Himalayas and kill all my passengers? Or let's just put that, in a context of a car. Tesla comes out, with a car, and one of them is the altruist, and the other one would be the egoist. The altruist will be 3 kids, across the street. I'm going to run them and save my passenger. That's the egoist. The altruist will be now just drive into the ditch, save the kids, but possibly kill a passenger. That is a code that will have to be determined. That is a question that needs to be raised, and only a philosopher can actually influence that coder to put that in the code. So why are we talking about this? It's because in education it's going to have a huge, huge impact. So you see, at the macro level, first of all, do you have any questions so far? I know this is very, very theoretical, but please ask any questions if you have any. Any microphone, if you have any microphone around? It is? So anyway, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, guys, is irrelevance. This is the impact of AI. Yesterday, I was at a talk, and they said, hey, you know what? AI and humans are going to cohabitate. It's going to be awesome. We're going to make our life better. Our lives better? Maybe, for sure. But lives of hundreds of millions of people? Not so much. Here's the history of, obviously you know it, the history of humanity. First world countries, they can't really make all these things. They need cheap labor, so they send that to Africa and to Asia. And basically, we as Africans, we have to, and we actually survived that long thanks to that. Making jeans, making pots, making everything that the West couldn't really make cheaper. Now you multiply that, you take robotics and AI, and all of a sudden, all these genes are going to be made by 3D printers. On Times Square, you're going to have a massive warehouse full of 3D printers. You're going to be able to order your genes, and it's going to be done right there. So obviously, AI is going to put so many people out of their job, hundreds of millions of people out of their job, that the question that it comes up out of all of a sudden is exploitation. You're going to go from exploitation to irrelevance. Do you know what irrelevance will create? It creates so much tension in the world. So obviously Europe, China, North America, we're going to be okay because we're going to benefit from that so much. But this is where education plays a massive role, is that if we don't do anything for these hundreds of millions of people who will be not only out of their job, but completely in marge of a society. Imagine what it means. Anything that has been produced, you don't look at it, you can buy it, you can produce it. Anything that is happening on the market, you can't do it anymore. So we're talking about a massive, massive crisis in that matter, and this is why we need to rethink education to actually get these guys back on the system. This irrelevance, and we talk about it already, is going to create so much trouble. And now I don't want to scare everybody, in that matter, but obviously irrelevance creates massive tension on a global scale. If you see, basically, back in the day, I started a PhD in geopolitics, and my line of study was basically what's happening with ISIS right now. Back in the days, it was Al-Qaeda. Irrelevance, this is what's happening. Irrelevance creates so much frustration that people start blowing shit up. It's really what's happening. They are feeling so this is why education, if we don't think about it in a global scale and in a better way, it will have a drastic impact on hundreds of millions of people, and we cannot really close our eyes and put our head in the sand as a matter. Okay? Any questions so far? So the other thing the other course that I facilitate at Stanford is the consumer behavior, and the neuroscience aspect of it. For our kids that we're trying to educate, there's a combination of gamification and AI that will make these, I don't want to say these gaming company, but it's going to be a lot of tech companies that will know more about your kids than yourself. I know it sounds really stressful, and I have a kid myself, but believe me, that's going to be the case. Because first of all, have you ever tried to take an iPad out of the hands of a 5-year-old? I mean, I tried that last night. It didn't go very well. The second thing is, all these tech companies are studying everything. They used to study everything outside of the body of your kid. All right? Every website he goes to, every move he makes on the iPad or on the phone. And it's also our case for adults. But now it goes even deeper than that. Pretty soon, we're going to be able to measure what's inside the body, not only for the kid, but for the adults too. Right now, as a matter of fact, you have systems where I can tell someone's blood pressure without touching him, someone's temperature, and I'm pretty sure you saw that at Shoppers, pointing at him, and I can tell you if he's 37 or 38 degrees Celsius. Pretty soon we'll be able to know what's inside the body, and knowing what's inside the body, I'll be able to determine what is the dopamine level of my child, of this kid, what is the serotonin level, what triggers him, what doesn't trigger him, what bores him, what excites him. And by the way, this dopamine loop that we're talking about all the time, gaming companies have really mastered it. But before the gaming companies and before Facebook, you need to go back to a place called Vegas. It's true, huh? It's absolutely true. Those guys have been hired from Vegas to work in the valley. Every slot machine has a chip. Every chip has an algorithm. This algorithm determines how much light, how much sound, how much reward I'm going to give you to hook you to that machine. They perfected it over time. I know these guys really well, and now they are hired by the big tech companies. Now when you're on Facebook, you wonder why you can't really get off your screen. Well, because everything is designed to get that dopamine loop. Fun fact, Vegas, what is the most common disease in Vegas? Bladder infection. This is my machine. I will not leave. Bladder infection is the most common disease in Vegas. So put that on your phone and apply that to your kid, and it becomes extremely, extremely dangerous for the development of a child. So I know all this sounds very, very, very dark, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I promise you, it's actually quite optimistic. But it's important that we talk about these very serious things. We obviously need to basically change the paradigm of education. The education system that we have right now is based on the Industrial Revolution, right? We're going to talk about it a little bit later. So in the middle of the town, we build a concrete building, and in this building, we're going to divide this building into rooms. And these rooms, you're going to have adults coming in and tell you about what happened to humans in the past. That's going to be history. And they're going to talk to you about social studies, and they're going to talk to you about math. We have done tremendous progress with this system. Unfortunately, this system is a little outdated now. I was talking to someone at the Toronto District School Board. And that person was super, super happy to tell me, hey, we are going to be teaching coding to our kids. And I was like, yeah, it's a good move, but it's completely unnecessary. AI is going to be coding way faster, way better than any human pretty soon. So it's almost like that the education system is always one step behind in everything we do. And this is really where it gets a little bit scary. We haven't been able to evolve at the same pace than the society. Take a look at communication. We went from the letter, also writing on stones, to the iPhone or to the smartphone. Take a look at transportation. We went from the horse to a Tesla. Take a look at medicine. We went from the scalpel, opening people and bleeding everywhere, to now you can operate remotely from a different country. Education, we're still in the same classroom. You're still in the same building. Building that have fences that protects you against the world. I'm not saying anything. I was a teacher myself, and I'm still a teacher. As a matter of fact, I taught kindergarten. I taught grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And it's amazing what we've been able to do with this system. But more and more now, it becomes irrelevant, and not only that, extremely dangerous for the future. I know that it sucks, that, okay, my kid has spent 900 hours studying multiplication tables. I know that it sucks. I know what I'm going to say sucks. But I'm so sorry, it's completely unnecessary. As soon as he understands that how multiplications work, that's fine, let's move on. Because guess what? Right now, I can tell you that 50% of the crowd doesn't know how much 9 times 8 is. Maybe you guys are teachers, so you know. But believe me, most people are going to be like, hey, 9 times 8. As a matter of fact, they don't even have to ask anymore. The phone is going to tell them. So that's why I'm like, can we not spend 900 hours on this and mostly prepare them for the future? That's really where our role as educators becomes critical. And I know it's really hard to hear. But it's almost like we're training kids to sew when sewing machines are being produced right now as we're talking. They're going to be completely irrelevant. So before we go into the language learning, I wanted to touch on a couple of points. First of all, is there any questions so far? I know that some people were skeptics about what I was saying, so please throw that at me, as blunt as you can. So, I don't know if you saw yesterday's LinkedIn report. LinkedIn is not only to connect people, but it's also to train people, and they have all these courses. So they have their report, that came out yesterday or 2 days ago, and it seems that there's a massive increase of people learning online. And it's true that more and more now, we're going to be judged not only by our PhD or by an MBA or by all that, but by what we've studied on our own and all the things that we have done, which is obviously more fair, right? So this changes pretty much everything, because we're going to see people stepping away from universities and going more to colleges, as a matter of fact, who are way more flexible than universities. Not only that, they're also going to step away from that, and they're going to start learning on their own. Today, if I want to learn how to edit a video, I can go online, spend hours, probably less time than if I was in a classroom, and learn Final Cut Pro 10 or Final Cut Pro 7 if you don't like it. And honestly, it's going to be enough. You can go buy. And then it's all about what you've done and who you surround yourself with that's going to make you an expert or not an expert. Not your PhD. That, by the time you finish your PhD, is probably going to be outdated. I'm a victim of that too, believe me. So what we're talking about here is basically there is obviously a lot of hope. And at least there's a lot of hope for a continent that is very, very dear to me. It's Africa. Why? Because huge population, and it is the population that is the youngest in the world, the youngest population in the world. What does it mean? It means that in the future, pretty soon, when we're going to retire, those guys are going to be boosting the economy. It's going to come from them, not from China, because everybody's going to be old. Although the one-child policy is not relevant anymore, so it's probably going to pick up. But in Africa, this is where it's happening. Now, Africa is a very interesting place. Well, it's not a place, it's a huge continent. But my point is, you see, when I was in Somalia not long ago, I saw that people completely skipped, the landline. And they went straight to the phone, to the cell phone, to the smartphone, as a matter of fact, where the educational system is going to be probably the same thing. People are not going to be starting to build an entire school board and 25 buildings that we're going to call school. They're just going to start building small, interactive centers where people can come and go whenever they want, but they will have and take the education from their mobile or from their device. This is where there's a huge, huge hope for the future. Any thoughts on that, guys? Don't let me, yes?
People who have the skills, you're talking about learning online. Yeah, you're talking about learning online, and as I see, you're mostly referring to skill learning, not about thinkers. That's two different things.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. Obviously, there's two separate things: the thinkers and the skills. But even the thinkers, when we talked about the philosophers, who are, I'm sure, going to take a bigger spot in our society, they will have to surround themselves with experts and learn with each other, as opposed to going to a room where there's someone who has an authority, going to drop all this knowledge, they're going to absorb the knowledge, and they're going to move on. Why? Because one thing is for sure with this AI, and everything that I said, obviously, is to take with a grain of salt. But one thing that I'm 100% sure that's going to happen: change. Change is the only thing that I can tell you as educators for the future. If you need to prepare your kids or your students for something, prepare them to absorb change, because it's going to change a lot. Don't forget about having a career. You're not going to get a career. Forget about having a job. You're going to have multiple jobs in 5 years and multiple careers in 10 years. Because things are going to move so fast that they will have to constantly retrain themselves. Whether they are thinkers or skilled, they will have to train themselves constantly. So one thing is for sure, it's like we have these kids, who are, they have a predominant intelligence that is kinesthetic, and some of those, who have a predominant intelligence that is interpersonal or intrapersonal. Either way, we're going to have to train those guys to handle change. And you will see that sooner or later, there will be a scientist who will come up with this new intelligence called the theory of change, or change absorption. How much can you absorb? How much change can you absorb in a short amount of time? But yes, obviously, everything else will have to be taken with a grain of salt. Very quickly, in terms of language learning, guys, so we talk about natural language understanding, natural language processing. Although AI is doing great improvement, we haven't seen a breakthrough yet. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't seen anything massive. We have in Toronto or in Canada, we have Element AI. I think they got $89 million invested last year. There's nothing on the market that they will be able to sell. We have the Vector Institute, awesome brains, amazing people. But right now, even Google, have you seen the last Google Duplex? So basically, Google has created this assistant where you take your phone and you say, hey, assistant, book me an appointment at a hairdresser, okay? And Google Duplex will literally call the salon and say, hi, I'm calling on behalf of Laura, and I would like to book an appointment at this time. And the person who interacts with this robot and is like, what time? Well, I would like on Wednesday at 10 a.m. And has all these signs of almost like human, you know, yeah, let me know. So it's almost impossible to know that if it's a human or a robot. And I was blown away when I saw that in 2017. 2018, May 2018, a year ago, sorry. Now, I made some research and I was like, I just bought the last Google Pixel phone yesterday. I just received it yesterday. So I tried to take a look at that and I was like, why isn't it implemented? Well, it's not implemented because to get that specific example of Google Duplex, and I'm encouraging you to take a look at what it is, when the CEO of Google presents it, I made some research, I called some friends from Google, and they said, yo, Haas, you have no idea, buddy. We made 3,500 calls to get one call that actually worked. So obviously, you know, and this is the reason why it's not on the market yet, obviously, because AI we've always been very, very optimistic about technology, and it has always taken more time than we hoped. So for natural language understanding and natural language processing, when we're going to have those glasses and those earpiece that's going to be able to translate every one of our thoughts into any language, not tomorrow, not today. It's an extremely complicated subject because we thought that it's all about sentence structure and you just translate it, but it's not about that. It's about emotions. It's about culture. A language, it's filled with culture. It's filled with nuances. And any robot or any AI right now, as developed as they are, they haven't been able to tackle that. There's a lot of data around it, and they're collecting even more and more data, but the end of language schools is not for tomorrow yet. Believe me, it's not for tomorrow. Because it's one thing, you know, to go to Japan and start talking with someone. As a matter of fact, there's all the non-verbal communication. And that, again, AI is tackling on that, because, by the way, just the camera of your phone or the camera of your computer can measure everything that's happening in your eye, know how much you are awake, how much you're not awake. A Fitbit bracelet can tell you how much dopamine or serotonin or even cortisol is going on in your body pretty soon. So you put all that together, which is not going to be for another 20 years at least, and you have something that will change the language learning world. But it's not for tomorrow. You'll see we're going to do like, oh, promise, 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 drop. Promise, 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 drop. And another promise, promise, and drop. One thing is for sure, though, what I said about irrelevance and hundreds of millions of people will be out of their job, but not out of their job, only out of their job, completely irrelevant, that's going to happen. And if we don't train people to be more reactive, train themselves, be better prepared for change, I see an absolute disaster that's going to happen. What I see ahead is, just to be blunt, I see wars, a lot of unnecessary wars. Educators today, more than any other time, have an extremely important responsibility. The responsibility is teach your students to master change. But more importantly, teach your students to know themselves. And you know, I know, it's a whole like very, it's a whole trick, you know, it's an old trick. It's basically know yourself, you know, and obviously all the philosophers have said that. But this is more urgent than ever. Guess why? Because if you don't really work on knowing yourself as a student, your Google Pixel phone is going to know you. Is working really hard, probably listening to me right now. This is not science fiction. Everything, all this is possible and it's been proven. They can activate the microphone of your phone even if you don't want it. The camera as well. They can gather all this data and know you better than you know yourself, or know your kids better than you know them. For the end goal is selling you stuff. Selling your kids stuff. And that's what I call, well, that's what we call digital dictatorship. The only remedy to that, it's actually to teach people to learn to know themselves. What is your values? What are your values? What do you need to, how to make a difference between love and pleasure? The difference between love and desire, between happiness and fun, between joy and fun, between what is suffering, what can suffer, and what cannot suffer. If they tell you, Canada is suffering right now because of the United States, let's fight. Hey, Canada cannot suffer. People suffer. Canada is a story that we told ourselves. That your phone can make you believe all that. And what is really, really strange and very, very dangerous for me is just that, unlike any other dictatorship, this digital dictatorship can make you love the dictator. They will manipulate everything that makes you think that, hey, I'm in total control. As a matter of fact, for those here in the audience who think that, hey, that's going to happen, not for me. I don't use Facebook. I don't use it. Well, you're probably more inclined to be controlled than any one of us. They are extremely, extremely good. A machine will know you better than you know yourself if you don't work at knowing yourself. This is the biggest and most important question in terms of education, teaching our kids not to be sheeps, but teaching them to actually learn to know themselves faster than a machine can do it, because it's happening. Yes?
You're talking about irrelevance being one of the big concerns. I fully agree with you, but I think we have a big challenge around that, because having people trained and having the companies that are pulling into these areas potentially providing funding to create education around that is great. But at the end of the day, it's the access to the technology that's going to need to be also supplied to this place or to the various places, because without the access to the web, to the various services, to AR, to VR, eventually those types of things will actually create a divide as well. And the class divide is going to go stronger. Education especially, there's going to be a lot of tools that we're going to be using to get education out there in different formats. But if there's places that don't have access to those resources, that's really what I think one of the big things we need to make shift around and start changing.
I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. When we talked about when we talk about this system here, and I said, oh, well, no, it's inherited from the Industrial Revolution and everybody's in rows and stuff like that, although not the case anymore. But you're absolutely right. We have an educational system right now, especially in elementary and secondary and possibly in universities. I'm not talking about colleges because they're doing an amazing job. We don't have any other alternative. We do, but we don't. We have LinkedIn that does this, and then we have Coursera, Udemy, but nothing really at the mass scale that could basically help hundreds of millions of people. And access is one of the big problems. However, what would cost more? Building many school boards with thousands of schools with all the staff that needs to maintain that school running, or setting up cell phone towers all over Africa. That's really where they completely leapfrog the entire landline. And I'm very, very curious what's going to happen soon. I hope that tomorrow's digital engineers or designers or game designers will come from different places that are not the usual suspects. We will be doing other stuff, but I hope that we will leave a share of this cake to everybody else. Now, when you see the superpowers that are in control right now, this is where I get a little bit more pessimistic. Do you think that, for instance, if we talk about the States, and believe me, I work there and I love the States and it's amazing. However, what's in control right now, it's when we see the current administration calling those countries shitholes. Do you think they're going to be thinking about what's going to happen to them in the next 5, 10 years? I don't think so. This is why I'm like, And by the way, Joe Biden is running for president, if you don't know. That happened yesterday. But yeah, any other questions, please? Yes.
You mentioned reactivity as something that's very important for teaching our children so that they can react to change. But I was wondering where you would put the role of being proactive and how we might be proactive to change rather than reactive.
I'm going to try not to be pessimistic. My first instinct would be like, too late to be proactive, man. But no, it's not too late. You're absolutely right. But if we want to be proactive, we need to go back to teachers' college and then train our teachers to actually implement that. Which, do you think it's the case right now? That's my only concern. That's really my only concern. You know, when here's, I don't know if I should tell that story, but anyway, what the hell, let's do it. So, I facilitate few courses at a university in California, but when I first came to North America, I really wanted to teach kids. And this is how I started teaching in elementary school. But I didn't go so I was in Toronto, I didn't go to OCT, Ontario College of Teachers, right? So I had to have these kind of contracts called long-term occasional teachers, all right? And at some point, I wanted to get my OCT certification, so go through Teachers College, right? So there was like some kind of a program where they said, hey, listen, if you have a bachelor degree in Canada, your teacher education thing is just gonna last 1 year. So you go through this accelerated program and it's awesome, great. So I was like, yeah, great, I'm gonna register for that. So I register for that, I pass the test, it's great, it's happening. Now they get back to me and say, hey, we cannot accept you. I was like, why? They're like, because your bachelor is not from Canada. I was like, yeah, but I have an MBA, a master from Canada. They're like, yeah, but we want a bachelor in Canada. I was like, no, but I have a master in Canada. It's like, no, but we want a bachelor in Canada. I was like, any bachelor? They're like, yeah, any bachelor, anything. And I was like, how do you want our future teachers to be proactive when you have such a monochronic way of thinking? Oh, no, I'm pressed. No, I'm paid to press on this button. And you're like, no, but press delete and repress it. They're like, no, delete, that's not me. That's someone else over there. So this is where my concern, this is where I have some concerns. And I know I'm being very critical, but it is really important that we are critical. The reason why education is not changing right now is because education has the monopoly. If education was a business, and if competition was out there, imagine if private schools started giving classes for free. Do you think your kid will go to a public school? I don't think so. And the teachers are doing their best with whatever they have. But at the top, it's kind of really scary. It's really, really scary. And I hope it's going to change pretty soon. And I know I'm being very critical because I'm in this position now where I can be critical, but that's also my role. And we're doing better than any other countries, except Norway, but that's not a reference. Because guess what? They could do as low as us. We could be like at a very low level, but because we are the best at that low level, we're like, yeah, we're pretty good. No, we're not pretty good. Education hasn't changed much. We need to really move it as fast as communication has moved, as fast as transportation has moved, and train people for the jobs of the future and not for the jobs of yesterday. And this is where my concern lies. Any question? Ooh, this is cool. I'm gonna be telling jokes from now on. It is a tough subject, I understand, but it is also important that we talk about it. This change is the most critical thing that is going to happen in the next 10 years. If we teach him to absorb the change, it will be, we'll have a chance. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit more about Norway, because you mentioned how they're a little bit further ahead, and what are they doing that you would recognize they're a little bit further ahead, and if there are other countries as well too?
They actually, at the bottom of things, no, at the foundation of things, they are more predisposed to change. They're really what it is. They study, they have a really good design thinking approach of education, and they look at the world and they look at what they have and they're like, let's make some connections. They use right now, they try, at least it's a project, they're trying to use AI to determine where to orient the kid, the orientation. Think about it, the orientation. When I was in high school, I had a person who was in front of me and who hasn't done anything but orienting people, and he's telling me, hey, you need to go to this path. How do they know? Guess what? AI is going to know way better than that person who met you twice last year. So Norway, this is what they're trying to do. They're collecting data on what those students learn and how they learn. They have a clear mapping of their intelligence, their predominant intelligence and everything, the way they learn, the happiness level, when they learn best, in the morning, in the afternoon, what did they, all that. And they are able to make a more enlightened decision about where to guide them. You love this and this and this and that. We're not going to tell you to pick a job. We're going to tell you this is what you love and this is what you need to look for in your career. But I was 17 when I went to med school. It was a disaster, an absolute disaster. I failed completely. I wasn't able to memorize anything. Why did they tell me to go to med school? They thought like, okay, yeah, just go to med school. It was a disaster. And then I became a nuclear power engineer. By the way, do you know how hard it is, for a nuclear power engineer after 9/11 to move to California and work in California? It's just like, it's super hard, yes.
One, two. There we go. What you were mentioning about Norway using AI to actually train. So there's a couple of key concerns there. One, any biases. Number two, if we're in a future where AI is determining where we go, yes, they can know us better because they have all these records of us. Even the ones that weren't digitized are getting digitized. So yes, of course, computers know us better. But if they're guiding us where we're going, we're going to start getting into bubbles and traps and, hey, you come from this culture, you should be over this way because you're a stronger worker, things like that. I honestly think one of the biggest things for education is actually cooperative education. So actually going out, trying some jobs, having experiences. Now that can be done inside of virtual reality where you're like, hey, trying an excavator, and actually experiencing things. And through experiences, helping to find what you like, what you're good at. And getting recommendations from AI, beautiful, fantastic. As long as it's a guide saying, hey, this is what we think you'd be good at, but where would you like to go? I think that's a key factor.
Honestly, I have nothing else to say because you said it all. That's exactly what it is. I'm not suggesting that AI will determine where to go, but just make some very broad suggestions that are based on data. But you're absolutely right about the cooperation and the cooperative learning. These are the skills of tomorrow. It's not going to be, basically take what a machine can do, what AI can do, and train your kid to do everything that it cannot do. A machine so far cannot take someone's hand and feel what they feel the warmth. They cannot do that. The empathy, the collaboration, all that is extremely important. Like, what is the impact on the job market? I can tell you, radiologists, big trouble. Why? Radiologists, not only, but they sit in front of a desk and take a look at basically an X-ray and all the radio, and that AI can do. Nurses cannot be replaced. Impossible you're going to replace a nurse. Do you see a robot coming and taking someone's hand? No, man. There's so much non-verbal communication that is happening in that interaction that is, right now, no machine can do that. So you're absolutely right. Try to think about whatever the machine will be able to do and train your kids but everything they cannot do. Philosophy, music. Do you remember those music teachers, those guitar players, that we pay like $20 to teach our kids how to play guitar? Well, those prices are going to start rising pretty fast. Collaboration, art, even though right before we talked about AI and art, how AI is catching up on that, it's still going to be a human trend. One thing that is for sure, it's basically AI is not going to be working on its own. It's still going to have to be coded by a human. But there's a huge bias in there too, and this is why we need people, philosophers, people who are more in the soft skills to actually get in there. All this cooperation, collaboration, that is the key for tomorrow. Question?
Okay, it works now. So I just had a question about how we can draw the ethical line when using AI, because for instance, we work with corporate clients. You can also work with universities. And so as you mentioned, AI learns from the data that is provided with, and it's going to create its own rules, for instance. So how can we protect the employee or the student or the teacher so that not too much information about themselves is shared or used by AI, and perhaps not with a crazy scenario, but against themselves?
You know what? This is a very, very important question that is obviously coming second, after, hey, let's tackle this new technology kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. The ethical aspect of what's coming is key in there. Otherwise, this digital dictatorship is going to happen way faster. But you can start by any engineer who codes on AI. I want them, as much as doctors, to have, how do you call it in English? Le serment d'Hippocrate. The Hippocratical sermon? Oath. The Hippocratical oath. For instance, you start setting up something for AI engineers to tell them, hey, here's what these are the lines of conduct that you're going to have to follow. And if you don't do it, you're going to lose your license. We have doctors, we have surgeons who lose their license after doing something bad. And actually, we have them more than we think. We just don't talk about it a lot. Well, same thing with engineers. I don't care how good you are. If you mess up something that will alter a kid's life or an adult's life, just for the gain or for profit or for more data, you're out. You cannot code anymore. This is a good first step, but it's not going to be enough. It's going to be a constant race in between technology and security. But
what they are willing to share. So just as we do on regular websites, or just giving them a notice that some of their data is going to be used, are you allowing this and knowing to what extent the data can be used?
I wish there was a solution, but you know what? It's been studied. Let's take a look at insurance companies. Insurance companies, I can tell you that for sure. Pretty soon they're going to come up with a Fitbit. Does anybody have a Fitbit or Google Watch or whatever? Yeah. This Fitbit kind of thing, they're going to say, you can wear it. We're going to be able to track everything and make you healthier. Or you cannot wear it, but if you're not wearing it, your premium is going to go off the roof. That's your choice. You want to pay for your insurance $1,500? No. I want to pay for my insurance $120. Let's wear the Fitbit, and on top of that, they're going to tell me whenever I'm getting sick. Best healthcare ever. So in terms of what am I choosing to share or not, unfortunately, the most vulnerable people, the most disadvantaged, they won't have a lot of choice. I cannot pay $1,500 for each and every one of my children, if I have like 7 children, to not wear the Fitbit. And on top of that, the Fitbit is going to tell me whenever my kid is going to have pneumonia or whenever he's going to have that. So I don't see why won't I do it. This is where relying on the user, I feel like it's already too late. That's really what it is. We won't stop this train. There's only, and it's pretty weird for a North African like me to say that, but there's only one way to hijack a plane. You're going to have to be inside the plane. It's really, that's the only way to put it. We need to get on board with this AI train and plane and go ahead with it. But yeah, these are very important questions for sure. Time for one last question? Yeah? The last thing, I wanted to finish on a positive note, but for some reason, I can't find my train of thoughts anymore. It's all very pessimistic. Please go ahead.
Hi, maybe this will help. I'm returned to school after 30 years. It took me a long time to get used to the digital stuff, but if I can do it, anyone can do it. So I'm not a teacher. I'm a member of a group where there's a lot of teachers who are complaining and they're very angry about even small changes to the system. What can I tell them? Because I'm sensing it's fear, not anger, but fear. What can I tell them to inspire them to maybe think a little outside the box? To at least open them, they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they have grandchildren. What can give them hope that it's not going to be apocalyptic, it's not the end of the world, you know?
I think this fear, that they're experiencing, first of all, they need to be aware of it. And once they're aware of this fear of the future and the fear of this technology, that they're going to be possibly outdated, where in fact, it's honestly their choice, they need to make the choice to say, do I want my students to experience the same fear of change, or should I prepare them for that, to avoid that? That's the only way. Using their fear to actually say, hey, I don't wish this on anyone, and training their students to actually be more prepared to jump from one job to another technology, to another way to do it. That would be key for the future. And obviously, all what I talked about earlier, the philosophy, the ethics, all that is extremely important, because if you take that away from it, it becomes a real cruel, cruel, cruel world. And you can see that, in different times in history. I remember that my parents, my grandparents, after living the French colonization in North Africa, I never really understood. Why do I tell my child, hey, it's okay to cry, tell me how you feel, tell me, express your emotions. And why did my parents and my grandparents say, no crying, you're a man, you don't cry. That is a complete result of Second World War and French colonization. We have no time to be emotional. Well, there's a lot of places like this in the world where, in fact, there's very few places like Canada where we need to teach the next generation to actually be more in touch with their feelings. You take that away, and all the coding is going to happen. Basically, take a coder, and you have two types of coders. Let's put it this way. You have one guy who's been raised in a very stable family, loving family, and another one who's a refugee, a war refugee. And they're all excellent coders. They are kick-ass coders. What kind of code is going to come from this guy or that guy? It's going to be very different. So this is what you need to think about. The next generation of engineers that are going to design the world, whether we have a chance to make them ethical, think about philosophy, think about the future, think not only about Canadians, but the entire world, the human race, or we're going to use AI for nationalistic battles, and Serbs against Croats, and Hutus against Tutsis, and all that stuff. All that also can be used. Technology is like a religion. There's no violent religion or peaceful religion. Don't tell me that Islam, is violent and this religion. No, it's humans. If your Islam is peaceful, you're going to be peaceful. If your technology, if your view of the world is peaceful, well, your technology is going to be peaceful too. But if the other way around works too. Thank you so much.
Round of applause for Hosni. Actually, Hosni, let's stay up here. I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Please.
You said something that really struck a chord with me, which is that our methodology in the public school system is where the problem happens. It starts, and we have to reinvent the way that teachers teach to improve the way that our students learn. And you mentioned something that I'm sure for a lot of folks out there is pretty controversial, which is the privatization of our education system, which really resonated a lot with me, because I would love to send all 3 of my children to private school because I know it is going to be better, and that competition just doesn't exist when our education system is a crown corporation. Are there any models out there that we can look to that is privatized, not a split system, where that is pushing education forward, or is this just not happening anywhere?
I hope that the alternative to this system that we have is not a private system. I hope so, because honestly, it's going to be such an unfair system if you put everybody, or if you try to put the wealthiest in a private sector and everybody else, is just going to have to follow. I hope it's not going to be the case. But I hope there will be also other alternatives, and it's also you teachers to figure out what are these alternatives. It could be obviously the online. According to this report from LinkedIn, there's like an increase of 29% more people from last year who actually learned online versus on-site. Online is not perfect. I teach online as well. But there's a hope, over there. What we're going to see, I think, if the online starts picking up and increase their level of engagement and collaboration with people, because it's very isolated so far, what we're going to see is more people going online, a standardization of the education, but for the universities, we're going to see a drop of attendance, except for Ivy League schools. Ivy League schools are going to be even more researched and even more praised. Why? Because more and more people are going to be like, hey, I don't want a university degree, except if it's from l'INSEAD or Harvard. Except that, that I would go. So you have a massive people going there, otherwise they're going to be like, Université of Paris, why would I do that?
But there's already a decline in enrollment in universities outside of that elite that you mentioned. It's happening already.
Already, absolutely.
Because there's less value placed on these middle-range universities. And it's all about, okay, if you're going to make a difference, you have to go to Ivy League.
And actually, to counter that, what they've done is universities, and this is what Voila Learning, my company, is really focusing on, is how universities can put some programs online to actually help more people. Universities right now, they are limited, or their revenue is limited by the number of seats in the university. Well, if you put that online, not only you can teach more people, you have a bigger influence, but on top of that, you will reach out to people that who will never be able to come to you, whether because of a visa or because of money, and so on and so forth. So you have like Stanford, for instance, they have a LEAD program called the LEAD program. They're reaching out to executives all over the world to take like this 1.5-year program, where honestly, it is really, really good, but it is fully online. If you don't want to go to Stanford ever as an executive, you can take the whole thing online, and it's quite collaborative. So there are solutions that are being tested as we talk, and we will see a lot of changes. Yeah, for sure.
I'm sort of selfishly asking these questions. We could talk a little bit after, but one of my clients is Babbel. Babbel is a language learning application mostly for direct-to-consumer, but they're seeing a divide in their business service offering. The corporations want that face-to-face. They want someone to show up much more than that individual sitting at home on their phone, using the dopamine to keep them addicted to learning language. A very efficient system. I don't think we can get rid of that in class. You'd mentioned a decline in that, but I think there's sort of a divide where there are some folks that just want that one-to-one communication.
Well, what I've said,
or group learning, or whatever case we want to call it.
No, for sure. But you see, what we've talked about for the past hour is basically there's a massive paradox in what I said. I said is, hey, online is going to be the future. Yeah, for sure, it's going to be the future because it's going to help so many people. But in the meantime, I said, but the skills of tomorrow is collaboration. Today, it is really hard to be online and collaborative. That's why we're working so hard at Voila Learning to build like virtual reality campus where avatars can hang out and they can express emotions and talk to other avatars and learn this way as if they were in a real campus. There are alternatives, but it's true that if I had to make a choice, between collaboration and online tech and access to more education, I would go with collaborations. That's why the current system is not meant to disappear, absolutely not. It is meant to improve, I hope so, towards that matter. But we need to be aware of what's happening in the future, and if we keep teaching our kids. I hate, this example of multiplication tables because I know that a lot of people are like, no, my kid needs to learn his multiplication table. But anyway, functions. Actually, bad example because you need the functions. Next question. Go
algebra.
ahead.
Algebra?
Well, I mean, it's the base of AI. AI is actually mathematics. So, is there anything, obviously, there are many examples of what, it's not about what we teach, it's more about how much time we spend on teaching those things. As opposed to, we could use that time to teach more collaboration, more empathy, more design, more organization. These are the skills of the future.
Well, and I find that there are some subjects that just are better suited for one of those two methods. I'm also a teacher, those two methodologies. Collaboration, there's music, for example. I hold a Bachelor of Music from the University of Toronto, and I can see the value of one-to-one or online learning for technicality, but there's so much emotion that you get through collaboration that I don't see there being a divide there. I see them cohabitating and complementing each other for different parts of that teaching and learning process. Does that make sense?
You're absolutely right. And for music, until someone comes up with a software that helps, actually it probably exists, you tell me, that helps students, music players, let's just say, to play together but remotely and feel that emotion that you and I would have if we had to play on the stage. Yeah. Until that happens,
it's sort of there at 10%, right? Like there are online jam session rooms and things like that, but it doesn't exist. So I think honestly, I think we're very much far away from replicating the power of a group playing on stage. And I do it quite regularly, and I can tell you that there's nothing that will engage you more as a musician than collaborating and standing with someone else.
100%, absolutely. If I had to choose, collaboration would be that's where I would go. You can't, turn every student into an algorithm coder, right? It's not the case, but you can take students and prepare them to be more empathetic, collaborative, aware of the future, aware of the human race, as opposed to, I am this and I define myself as this as opposition to that. That's really where we need really to change a lot of things. Yeah.
All right, and with that, let's wrap up. Thanks a lot, Hosni. Round of applause. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We're going to do a little stage changeover, guys. We need to run the chairs up for the next one.